Good morning and welcome to the Standing Policy Committee on Water and Waste for this Friday, November 1st of 2024. I'm the chair for this Standing Policy Committee. My name is Councillor Evan Duncan. I'm joined by Councillors Dobson, Gilroy, and Santos this morning. Before we get started with our regular reports, I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territories, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake, 41st Nation in Treaty 3 territory. Could I have a motion to approve the last minute meetings minutes? Councilor Gilroy, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. We do have a few delegates today. I'll pass that on to our clerk to introduce.
So just for the committee's information, the appeal on today's agenda has been withdrawn, so we'll move into delegations. And first is Councillor Mays from the St. Patel Ward to be heard with respect to report 1.
Morning.
Morning. Thanks for hearing from me. And I circulated a map. It's a little hard to read. It was circulated here, I think, some months ago by Kendall Thiessen when he was the Riverbank guy. Here he is no longer with the city. But I'll make reference to that. It's probably worth going over a bit of history on this report. It kind of stands for the principle of once things get delayed a bit, the chain gets broken and the confusion descends. Really, this Greenback Alley debate goes back at least to 2013. At that point, I was chairing the Mayor's Environmental Advisory Committee. There was a guy named Bill Dowie, who I would like to commend, who is still around trying to lobby on some issues with the city. Bill Dowie very much wanted us to do a green alley pilot project. A number of cities have done this. Chicago, for example, was much discussed. There's a couple of articles from Montreal that I have. I won't circulate. I think they already were circulated months ago. 100 different green alleys. So sort of the gist of this report is this idea is crazy and incredibly expensive, and yet oddly many other cities have done a version of this. So I think I would question the unfeasibility of the idea. So we did have the funds to do one green alley pilot project back in 2013. It was, to put it charitably, a fiasco. The location was switched at the last minute. No measurements were taken before or after of the flow. It was improperly installed, and the maintenance that was supposed to take place didn't take place. I don't think you can conclude from that this is a terrible idea when, frankly, the staff put it in poorly, didn't maintain it, and didn't have any way of measuring its success or failure. It did lead to the memorable headline in an Aldo Santon article, Greenback Alley becomes a black hole for money. But it was more expensive than a traditional lane. However, given the way it was done, given the last minute change of locations, I don't think we can dismiss the idea out of hand. This more recent discussion comes out of Councillor Allard and I think led by Councillor Allard, talking to the then new MLA for St. Boniface, Robert Loisel, who really wanted to do some of these projects. A lot of his riding would have the problematic gravel back lanes. Thank you. Is it enough? So the gravel back alley issue is predominantly a St. Boniface ward, St. Vital ward issue, although every ward has at least some, except maybe Councillor Luke's. So what to do about the gravel back alleys? Some attempt to do some sort of green alley pilot project was suggested by Loisel. Councillor Allard put this idea forward. Could we use some of the green infrastructure money from the combined sewer plant? As you'll know, we're putting in over $100 million putting in over $100 million on green infrastructure as part of our combined sewer work over the next 20 to 70 years, depending on how long it takes us to do that. So I think a decent idea, a good attempt. It bounced from Public Works back over to this committee, I think because of that discussion of the green infrastructure money. We did get a presentation from Kendall Thiessen that said, you can't just throw this idea out on the breezy assumption that Winnipeg soil can't handle this kind of project. look at these areas where there's alluvial soil nearer the main rivers, river deposits, it might work there. So there was a memorable exchange back in 2014 or so where we were told within the same week, you could never have a subway in Winnipeg because its soil is like Chicago's, and that's why they have an L in Chicago, an elevated railway. The soil can't support. So our soil is like that. And within the same week, you can't do a greenback alley here like Chicago does. Our soil's totally different. So one of those statements had to be wrong. And, either the soil is the same or it isn't, but an excuse for inaction that our soil is both the same and totally different from Chicago was a memorable discussion. In any event, according to Kendall, who actually knows a thing or two about this, you could try these green alleys in certain parts of Winnipeg near the rivers where there's this alluvial soil. So that's positive. The report makes a reference to that, saying we do have 10% alluvial soil. Not much of it is where there's the combined sewer system. So, okay. I do think the cost estimates in the report are to be kind of wildly inflated, and saying that this would be 80% more than an asphalt lane is, I think, extremely debatable, but and I'd be happy to debate that if desired. But I think to move forward here, if we're going to move forward, fine. Don't pay for any of it with the green infrastructure money that's devoted to water and waste. There's $100 million to be spent on that. Let's just separate that from the alleyways. Okay, so we have these alleyways. What I would suggest, I've talked to Councillor Rowlands, who's certainly interested in trying to do something in the area where there's alluvial soil in her ward. That would be roughly the area just north of the Wildwood Golf Course, if you can visualize that. Across the river is the one part of my ward where this might work, Kingston Crescent. And there's some other areas in Councillor Allard's ward and sort of areas near the Assiniboine where this actually might work. So for today at least, deal with this as you see fit. I don't think there's any sense in sending it back to Public Works. It's already been there. I do think Councillor Rowlands might be interested in becoming the author of this, which frankly would increase the likelihood of its adoption around here. So I will talk to her, and my name won't be on it. We'll have Councillor Rowlands move it forward. Try and do something on these green alleys in a couple of areas, probably one around Wildwood, one Kingston Crescent, one or two more. I think the estimates of the maintenance and the cost are quite inflated, frankly. If it's such a terrible idea, why are we so far behind other cities in doing this is a question I would pose. And frankly, there's a cost to not improving the whole idea here was let's reduce the flow into the system by having it go into the soil. There does seem to be some value in that. It might reduce the costs we have to incur later on the sewer work. So divorce it, I guess, from the green infrastructure funds that are water and waste. That was always going to be an awkward fit. I do think the idea has merit. I will express frustration that the way this was implemented in 2015, the last minute change of location, the failure to install it properly, the failure to maintain it properly, the inability to measure the before or after flows. If people, we can make people do stuff, we can't make them do it well, is maybe the axiom there. So let's try this again. We'll see if Councillor Rowlands can come up with an approach that might actually pass budget or pass at Public Works. But it is a valid concept. It is widely done in other cities. It's certainly done in some other cities we keep saying we have to emulate. We could do it. I think the value of this whole process has been the map that you see in front of you from Kendall, saying if you're going to try it in these areas where there's alluvial soil. So this hasn't been a complete waste of time at all. I think that's helpful. That says, it might work. You can't just use the soil argument to throw this idea out. It might work in these areas. The other positive I think that comes of this is, at least I want to commend the planning department seems to have grasped that we have a problem with the gravel back lanes, back alleys. We don't maintain them. We can't just say, well, they have to be maintained to be passable. Therefore they must all be passable. No, we aren't maintaining them. we aren't maintaining them anywhere near a passable state for most of the year. The planning department seems to have grasped that, and said, look, we won't allow triplexes on there, we won't allow lot splits on there. It's not gonna improve the situation, but we aren't consciously and deliberately going to make it worse. So at least I think this whole discussion has been helpful in terms of having the planning department say, look, we recognize at least that there's a problem. Many of these lanes aren't passable for large chunks of the year. And let's admit that reality and not try to worsen it with our densification policies. So I don't have a clock in front of me,
Yeah.
so I'm sort of at
I
a
was gonna
loss.
give you the old 1 minute warning.
Yeah, so I think for today, do as you need to receive it as information, whatever. And then we'll try it again. I think Councilor Rowlands has some interest in moving something not tied to the green infrastructure money, but tied maybe for specific examples where there's the alluvial soil, whether they're in combined sewer districts or not, won't matter. And we can go forward and see if that'll pass muster in the budget.
Thank you, Councilor Mays. Are there any questions? I need to be educated on alluvial soils and this map. So I'm looking at it. Are the outlines of the brown lines like within, along the rivers, the alluvial soils?
I think Cynthia would like to take that question.
Yeah, that's correct.
That was a joke. Would you like to take that question, please? Trying to put you on the spot. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's typically where it is. An alluvial soil is, it's like a less dense clay, will have more sand and gravel, you know, it allows a bit more ability for soil to percolate than a denser clay. I'm not Kendall. I just have to preface that, you know, this is the Cynthia version of soil.
So
Trust the engineer on that. Yeah, the lacustrian's heavier, the alluvial is more deposited and therefore might actually work for this kind of thing.
So if you have, Councilor Mays, any of the feedback on what went wrong with the install and maintenance of these?
There's just the one. I remember sending a Radio Canada reporter up and she called me back because it was during the campaign. It must have been during the 2018 campaign. She said, "You sent me to the wrong place. There's nothing green here." I said, "Yeah. No, actually, it's all just a different type of cement or pavers. Like that, you see these lovely pictures from Montreal, and there's like grass everywhere, and these two, you know, tire tracks basically of pavers, and there's in between there's grass, and our thing is you would not know. To the naked eye, it looks completely like a paved alley because it is a paved alley, it's just paved slightly differently. And it was I don't know why it was moved in the final days. We were getting ready to do a media thing and then they moved the location. Yeah, so no one, it was doomed to fail from the start. If you didn't know what the flow going in was before, how could you ever tell if it worked or not?
And I can, if it helps, I can speak to that for you, Councillor. Unfortunately, like we did do some pre-flow monitoring at the planned location. And then they went and did some more geotechnical and the subsurface soil condition wasn't conducive to the greenback lane. So then they had to, as Councillor Mays mentioned, they moved it kind of last minute. So we weren't able to, yeah, there was no pre and post evaluation because for that reason.
The report is appended to this, the previous report.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
And to not come across as completely bitchy, frankly, the stuff that's mentioned in the report, the stuff on John Hirsch Way, Cynthia and
Michelle.
thank you, Michelle took me over there a couple of years ago. That is actually pretty impressive. Like that, there was money spent, there was work done, there were like subsurface. I'm no expert on it. The engineers can probably speak to it better about the retention there. Like that there was a genuine effort made there. So yeah, to that extent, I agree with the report that this is good. Some work was done there and seems to be a success. And more is coming in Armstrong. Yay, more is coming in Mission. That'll be several years down the line. But so that the green infrastructure stuff is picking up pace. So that I don't mean to sound too negative on that. That's getting going, which is a good thing.
All right, well, we will see what the appetite of the committee is here, but I don't disagree with you in the fact that this type of thing needs to be done throughout the city, one way or the other. So thank you for your delegation.
Thank you.
Okay, and the final delegation is David Grant to be heard with respect to report one. David is joining us via Zoom today.
Morning, Mr. Grant.
Morning. And obviously, I'm here in support of the staff who do not want more permeable paving installed. I want to thank Brian Mays for educating everyone. I was pleased to hear him say during questioning that folks should listen to the engineer. On the other hand, I've advocated for decades that we need to divert more water from our rivers into our water table. Done on ag land, this can keep rural wells alive. Because Gov failed to do this, to listen 20 years ago, our rural friends have been nearly out of water in recent years, and flooding events are much worse. On the topic of these pavers, I've seen permeable paving on Belle Isle in Michigan to take heavy truckloads very infrequently. These are based on thick concrete pavers with an 80% open area. They can carry truckloads, but allow water to drain. So my own backyard slopes away from the house. That's been useful. The low spot in my yard is a wide area that fills with water as the snow melts and after big rain events. It all drains into the ground in a day or two. Storm runoff can be minimized across the city if all residential properties had such features, where a whole community drains its roof into its downspouts into the storm or combined sewer. Then you have a problem of overloading those sewers because we have a lot of roof area. So as you can see, I understand the merits of separating the flows, the storm flow and the sanitary, and of putting more of the rainwater and snow melt into the ground. So these are valid things. On the other hand, as from what I've seen here, the cost of doing this per gallon of water or per 1,000 liters or whatever of water that doesn't go to the sewage plant is very high. And anyway, as I pointed out here before, permeable paving requires extremely careful engineering plans and execution, and even then tends to cause pavement failure within a few years in the cases that I've monitored in the US. In those cases, the pavement has significant slope, so heavy rain is not an issue, it just runs off into the stormwater system. And there was no heavy truck loading, and if frost isn't an issue, it does simplify things. Unfortunately, in our back lanes, we have all of these big issues. We have garbage trucks, recycling trucks, and frost, and so on. As I pointed out before, any attempt to minimize CSO should begin with a flow monitoring program of the type that I published in Public Works magazines more than 50 years ago. The effect that CSO, combined sewer overflow, the effect of the CSO can be measured with a program of sampling in the days before, during, and after a heavy rain event. That was what I did as a young engineer. I had a student helper, and we went out before rain was expected, and we had level weirs, which is a V-shaped obstruction in the sewer pipe, and the depth of water going through that little V notch translates directly into how many gallons an hour were flowing. Anyway, the percent reduction in BOD, biological oxygen demand, load on the river can be much higher with flow and interceptor valve adjustment than with any practical change in pavement porosity. So there are ways of accomplishing what this program wanted to accomplish. And I'm not sure, I've not had any feedback from the city staff on how many of these steps they're actually taking. You do have I believe, the power to ask for such stuff, and I would suggest that you do so. The other one, installing new sanitary piping and doing it sooner, putting up the schedule, has the greatest effect on the river and the lake. Another issue here, as our population grows to 1 million and far beyond, and we exclude nearly all the stormwater, will our sewer systems and treatment plants be able to handle the sanitary flow? I expect that they will, because right now, even if nothing overflows to the river, when there's a mild rain, a lot of that rainwater goes to the sewage plant. And we have a certain capacity there to handle. And obviously, if flows are up higher, the percent of bad stuff that flows out of the plant goes up. Getting this done in 8 years is good. Waiting a century, as people have mentioned, to fully separate our sewers means too much domestic sewage in the lake. And I would suggest that it's one thing to say that this permeable layer, et cetera, and all these actions and separating the sanitary, these are all things that we can say are to protect the lake. But the other thing I would suggest is that as we step up the population with infill, because that's where city government and the federals are heading us, if we set up the infill and build lots more apartment buildings, that means all these sewer lines are going to be carrying an awful lot more sewage. And if we keep allowing rainwater in there, it makes things much worse, and we have overflow events much more frequently. So I would suggest that as we get ready for our 1 million or 1.2 million people, that we step up our combined sewer separation program significantly. That should no longer be a 90-year program. Let's put the money into it and get some from Ottawa if we need, but to be able to handle this in a small number of years. So rather than increase the flow of pavement into the flow of water into the pavement and adjacent land, I believe we should do all we can to reduce that flow. Water seeping into the gravel base, as I've explained before, of a heavily loaded road will weaken it, leading to failure of the pavement and the need to rebuild the road years before it wears out. Maintenance, including installing tar snakes on roads as soon as cracks appear in pavements, and installing impervious caps on our boulevards, can drastically extend the life of our roads. But as far as our mission of reducing combined sewer overflow, and that was what was used initially to justify the permeable lane paving, there are steps we can take to drastically do that. And I think we should invoke the building in sewer capacity because that's been a big part of our infill. And that right now in the south part of Winnipeg, there are so many residents now that we can't afford to build another apartment building because the sewers won't handle it. If we could keep that rainwater out by separating the sanitary and storm, we would achieve that. So I'll pass that on to you, and hopefully if you have your staff do more monitoring, we will have a better system and be better prepared for our million or 1.2 people. So thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Grant. Questions from the committee? Seeing none at this time, thank you very much for your presentation. Enjoy your weekend. All right, that appears to conclude our delegations for today. We do have the one report before us. I'll turn to the public service for a summary, and then we'll go to questions if there are. Good morning.
Morning, yes. As I said, you've got the Greenback Lane feasibility review report before you today. There's been a lot of discussion already on the background, how we got here, provided by a delegation. So I'll just give a high level overview, and then I'll turn it over to Cynthia for any further highlights or questions. So this particular report is here because last spring, SPCE asked us to kind of review the feasibility, look at the feasibility of doing another pilot for one of these greenback lanes, because the history of the previous pilot not really being an effective pilot project because of all the challenges in it. So we did take a look at that to say, okay, if we were going to do another pilot with full data, like baseline flow data, location and construction and monitoring to try to evaluate what's the best type of green paver arrangements or this sort of thing, like to get information to how we could apply this to other areas in town. We took a look at that and did come up with those cost estimates that are in the report. It's about $460,000 for maybe a year and a half study. And then, $2.75 million capital for the construction and monitoring and that the ongoing maintenance would be separate from that and probably about $20,000 a year on a typical kind of back lane length. So we did come up with some costing on that. I would, we'd be remiss to present this as saying, oh, this isn't a good idea at all. These are options for green pavement that are adopted in some other cities for sure. But what we're trying to say here is that based on our assessment, our CSO dollars are better spent on, we get more bang for our buck in the green soil, the soil cell storage systems we have, and the other types of things we're doing in like in Armstrong, like on Leela, that sort of thing. So it's not that we're dismissing a set of hand. That would be mischaracterization of this. It's just that our recommendation is that we focus on other technologies that we already have working in Winnipeg and that we want to expand. And as we go along with the CSO program in different districts, we're always looking at other options. So something to flag, like these industry-wide, there are green pavers in place in some other cities. There are a couple of studies we do refer to. One study that was done in Toronto. There's other studies done in Minnesota about cold climate green black lanes. They do require more maintenance. That's obvious. To be cleaned properly, and even with that maintenance, they do degrade over time. The performance degrades over time. So certainly, it's that the cost of that has to be associated with an appropriate benefit, and in some cases, the benefit is there. We're saying that without doing this pilot, we're not sure if we can qualify the benefit being here. I think that would be a fair way to say it. The report does include, as you mentioned, the appendices have the previous reports presented to SBC, including the original PowerPoint presentation on the first pilot project. Did you want to go over the main bullets of the report?
Yeah, I mean, I can, so the initial pilot project, spoke a bit about it at the start. The location changed. So that prevented us from looking at a pre and post flow situation. And the reason it moved was due to the geotechnical issues, so the soil conditions. So it does speak to picking the right location. Like there's a small subset soils in Winnipeg that are slightly amenable. Overall, our clay soil is not great for these type of infiltrations. The alluvial is a bit better, right? It's the better end of the soils. So that was, that was kind of the first reason why that pilot project wasn't successful. The maintenance also wasn't undertaken. So they do require specialized maintenance. They need sweeping because the premise is that, where the pavers interlock, it's the joints where the water can infiltrate. So you have to make sure you keep it clean or you lose the benefit of that infiltration. You also have to move away from sand. So we use a lot of sand in the winter to, for icy conditions, you can't do that on these. So you're limited to applications of salt, which are more temperature dependent, right? So in terms of our climate where the back lanes can get really icy, kind of that safety side of things can become difficult as well. And then as Tim alluded to, some number of studies are showing that, kind of over time, even when you're sweeping, even when you're maintaining, they do start to clog up in the joints. And they also require extra maintenance, like we've had to go out and level the pavers. Snow blades can get, like if you're trying to clear them, you have to raise the snow blades, but then if the pavers shift due to frost heat and they're a bit higher, you can clip them, then you have to, so that.
Sorry, I should just, the other thing to this point about the shifting, the permeable pavements, this kind of green pavement use in other jurisdictions, a lot of it is on parking lots and low traffic areas, not necessarily, you know, a back lane that's in use for garbage trucks and this kind of thing. So there is, just that factor, you shouldn't lose scope of that. This feasibility study was talking about back lanes that see traffic, like garbage trucks and residential traffic, versus the overall idea of permeable pavement for larger, like you can just think of the impact, the runoff from a parking lot versus the runoff from a back lane. There's more advantage to using permeable pavers on things like parking lots. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we don't, this is talking about green back lanes. This isn't saying permeable pavements, you know, shouldn't be used in Wigan.
Yeah, I just have questions and.
You guys heard that?
Yeah, certainly. I was just gonna add, like, if we're talking about switching gravel back lanes to green back lanes, I just wanted to note that like a gravel back lane is inherently a green infrastructure. So anything you do to a gravel back lane is going to increase runoff. So that, you know, just if we're looking to limit flows, gravel back lanes
Are
do a pretty
already
good
pretty
job.
good, alright.
Yeah. But I'm not discounting other things that come with gravel back lanes, right, that people may not like. I'm just, in terms of flows, anything we do is going to increase the flow.
All right, any questions? Councilor Gilroy?
So I'm just curious, because you talked about like the civil cells, like for, I know for the trees, the bolts for the trees and stuff like that. So how did we get like, is it more beneficial for us to do a green project on the street versus maybe a back lane? How do we get from like gravel back lanes? Because I know we are just from other like meetings before, I know that we're really, the soil conditions are like the important thing for doing the papers. So, can you just talk a little bit about why, maybe what other things we could be doing, maybe a green street with
Yes.
more trees or something like that
Yeah.
versus this? Yeah.
That is a fantastic question. And we've had some really good success with these silver cells or things like that, which are basically a soil storage system, sorry. I had too much candy last night or something, I was a little thick. So kind of like milk crates, right, underneath, you know, they're not for like heavy traffic or anything like that, but it allows water to be stored. And not only does it reduce runoff, but it provides an added benefit by giving a water source to trees. So in a lot of cases, we can add to the tree canopy. And that's a great example of what we plan to do for our Armstrong Combined Sewer District along Leela, is we're going to be using these green infrastructure solutions that we've proven in our city already. So we've got like Broadway, John Hirsch Place, and we'll be actually adding to the tree canopy, planting more trees. So there's lots of options of things that we can do that have multiple benefits. So, you know, decreasing flows in, you know, aligning with, you know, our strategic plans to have more trees and the benefits that those come with. We'll be looking at things such as bioretention and rain gardens and doing these things like along the streetscaping where we're already going in. They'll be designed and we'll also have a way to measure their benefits, right? So some of them will be new for us here in Winnipeg, and it'll be important for us to be able to evaluate the cost benefit and, you know, the reduction to runoff, but also look at the other benefits that they may bring as well.
And so what is that program called? Because this is like really kind of talking about the back lanes.
Right.
So is that under
It's
our just part of our overall
Yeah,
combined sewer overflow program?
yeah, that's right. It's our CSO master plan. It's provided a 10% allowance, and you know, it's a number, right?
Mhm.
It's not saying a hard 10% for every contract. It's kind of program wide that approximately 10% is going to be dedicated to looking at these green infrastructure solutions. So we incorporated into all the districts we're looking at, and we'll be looking at you know, obviously some tried and true, but looking at some new potential solutions that could work in Winnipeg.
Yeah, because I was a part of, like, I do remember that first pilot project, and so I understand kind of the background of how that just, you know, and part of it doesn't work out here. So just But if we're finding other ways to do it in
Mhm.
other places, like you said, Leela and within our
Yes.
combined, then
Certainly.
we
we're
are
not-
doing the work, it's just in a different kind of way.
Correct, yeah, like we're not dismissing the need to, reduce flows into the sewers or the need to look at green infrastructure. We're just saying we wanna make sure that we're spending the money in a way that's giving us the most bang for our buck.
Winnipeg. Winnipeggers, we're always looking for a deal.
Yeah.
So the gravel that is obviously the topic of conversation in this report, but I suppose if we're not going to go to redoing back lanes in general or streets in general, and they say redoing, so because there's already some type of infrastructure there. Is there, and to Councilor Gilroy's point, is there a plan for any future developments, any future roadway infrastructure, whatever the case may be, that will have different types of parameters to include, instead of just a, 10% goes towards the green infrastructure piece? I'm more so thinking our most recent discussion about the Naui Odina
Mhm.
project and how they're trying to bring in innovative processes to, I guess, for the runoff, right?
Yes.
Whether it's a bioswale, rain gardens, whatever the case may be, but is this something that we're moving towards to having in all new builds, developments, precincts?
We certainly work with Public Works on any of their like major road reconstructions. We work with other departments on, opportunistic locations where we can do this type of thing. I know development and different developers are becoming more interested in incorporating these elements. So it is something that we're going to continue looking at, working with them. We're certainly working with the developers for Naui Odina and trying to come up with some innovative solutions for that area.
See any other questions? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll move to receive this information.
Would you like to concur?
Yeah.
There are two items there.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I concur with the, yes.
The motion is to concur with both recommendations of the Public Service 1 and 2. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. One item and one item only.
So move to adjourn?
We will move to adjourn by Councilor Gilroy. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much and have yourselves a good weekend.